and kind folks out there. Hello, I am your host, DJ. Thank you for joining me. Today is Monster Monday. And for those who don't know, we take a subject, take that subject and stretch it out all week long with different themes and subdivisions of said subject. And today on Monster Monday, we're going to talk about winter. Yeah, winter both in the physical sense of chill and cold and deep freezing, as well as some of the more ephemeral elements such as stasis or the ending of the ending of a project or a regime or a city or the ending of life and things of that nature. So we're also doing this because during the month of December, my real life gets in the way, and we're back to have a daily show with the hours that I put in. So I thought we'd talk about some things that deal with December, and of course January here in the States. Much of the states, we're very familiar with winter, so yeah, it's a thing. Okay, so here on Monster Monday, I thought we would talk about some of the really interesting things that we can do with, hey, Foolish Kiwi, hey, what's going on? And everyone else that's taking part. One of the things I love about the winter season, not in real life, I mean in tabletop RPG games, is the fact that you can make very interesting adversaries for people by just reskinning them, reflavoring them, or changing their goals, their capabilities, and making them far, related to the winter location, right? I mean, take something as simple as a creature as simple as, like, in the photograph, right? A bear, some kind of predator, a tiger, some kind of large lizard or something. Paint them white, have them adapted to that region, and all of a sudden now you've got yourself a basic creature, which is, let's be frank. Um, if you can take any monster manual or any creature type thing you have for your favorite role-playing game, reskin them for every environment, and you've already multiplied every creature type in your book by like 9, 10, 12, or what have you. So winters just happens to be one of them. If you take the same wolf and you've got winter wolves, you can make swamp wolves, you can make desert wolves, or whatever, etc., etc. But winter just happens to be one of them. And one of the great things about winter is you can really pull on the strings of the lack of resources. It's cold, it's brutal, there's a lack of food, and while there isn't a lack of water, there may be a lack of heat to get to the water, right? All you need is a bowl and some heat, and you can melt as much snow as you like. But finding shelter and trying to collect resources that are out there, also, along with trying to find resources, or just in general trying to find anything that might be covered in, from a dusting of snow all the way to feet or tens of feet of snow, maybe stuck in an avalanche or blizzards or anything like that. So winter and snow itself is a great way to hide things from adversaries and the player characters alike. And how easy is it to have the MacGuffin out there in the cold, and the reason why people don't normally see it, even though it's very close to where people live, is because it's friggin' cold. There's no reason to go there, and it's covered in snow. So it's a good excuse to have abandoned spacecraft, or an old ancient temple, or an abandoned castle, or whatever the case may be. A massive battle that happened hundreds of years ago, covered with snow. Another thing I think for monsters, especially the mindless ones, is winter also has a correlation with stasis. So constructs and undead are really cool to use to have them stuck in the snow. And circumstances are applied to the frozen wasteland, snow and ice and things like that, that they are released from the snowy tundra or something. Like imagine your player characters finding shelter in a cave, and they sit down and they gather their belongings and they're wrapped in furs, and of course someone magically or with their skills or what have you easily starts a fire with what little twigs they have, and they put little stones around it, and they're sitting there warming their hands, and the walls are starting to drip, and lo and behold, out of the walls, the walls start to crack and such, and then the player characters realize that the little warm cave they've created is actually creating the dangers that are around them as the undead start coming out of the walls because they're being thawed or something, and then that that in itself could extend to be its own horror as they're thinking like, okay, we can warm ourselves, but what the hell's going to happen if every place we stop is going to release, you know, hundreds of thousands of undead that have been frozen after this massive ancient battle that happened. Foolish Kiwi says, not to mention the opposite of the covered snow treasure, like blood trails, big beastly footprints, etc., are easier to follow in the snow. And it's funny because well, slight plug, I did mention that in the Arctic Reach cinematic environments books that we wrote, and snow has that. It's like that weird dichotomy of like, okay, it covers everything, including like if it's snowing, all like you're mentioning, like blood trails, footprints, things being dragged through the snow, evidence of some kind of like violent conflict gets covered over when it snows. But then when it's not snowing, again, all those things, like you said, blood spilling out, and um, that a wizard came by because there's a big giant, evidence of a fireball that went off that melted the snow, and now there's this big round icy patch with like dead bodies in it or something. Then all of a sudden, it's very easy to follow, and like mixing and matching and flipping those elements in the story is actually kind of cool, meaning maybe one player character is the ranger or the druid, and it's easy for them to navigate around this landscape because they're like, I'm not going to leave any foot trails. It's easy for me not to do that. But all their fellow compatriots are like leaving these deep footprints, and the rangers doing like the face palming, like, oh my goodness, we're going to get tracked by everything around here, and what a cool way for them to try to figure out how to remain hidden, or the PCs find a trail and they're trying to figure out what, maybe it's a singular creature or a number of predators, or maybe there's more of a sentient group of adversaries that are like, they're like circling around each other, trying to find out where they are to ambush them at the exact moment. And these are like trying to follow their trail, and then the adversaries and the enemies are trying to follow the PC's trail and trying to cover up. And then you have yourself like weather events, right? Maybe it starts to snow, it becomes a blizzard, in which case, on one hand, it's like, great, our trail's being covered. We don't have to worry about being attacked when we set up another camp. But then you're like, okay, it's a blizzard. I hear noises, and I see red eyes at the very edge of our light dome or something, and I have no idea how many enemies are out there. Tesla's so funny. Yeah, watch out where the huskies go, and don't eat that yellow snow. Frank Zappa. Yeah, yellow snow. Like, you taste it. I don't taste it. Looks like lemonade, but I'm not going to taste it. Well, um, uh, yellow snow is a real thing. Somebody in the group might be able to sniff out that yellow snow and like, hmm, smells like I'm thinking Boulay piss. No, no, no. Dire wolf piss. No, 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 no. Okay, I'm thinking warg pee. Here, you taste it. I'm not that. Yeah, you're right. Hey, Encountermancer. Good morning there. Or at least good morning here in the States and whatnot. Yeah, this we're talking about winter, and of course, in Monster Money, lots of creatures that live in the winter. Now, so we've got ourselves snow, and then we've got blizzard thing. We also have the extreme cold, and while you might not want to pull on this tendril too much, I understand that with the extreme cold, if you really, really want to modify some of your adversaries, I don't know if any of you guys remember this. I'm an old grognard, so I remember that in older editions, they used to have thermal vision as opposed to dark vision. Ranger skill, snow tasting. Yeah, every ranger that plays a winter-based ranger is like, I don't want to talk about it. Oh man. Or maybe they collectively spread the lie that the snow tastes like lemonade, so that no one thinks that they're like they're out there like taste the yellow snow. So the anyway, I'm getting squirreled. So the idea of frigid cold is a thing, and when I say don't pull in a tendril, just follow me on this, okay? The older editions used to have something called thermal vision, and as opposed to dark vision, which I suppose we could, thank you, dead man, put in a link to a YouTube channel, the YouTube video for Frank Zappa's "Don't Eat the Yellow Snow." The um, the idea may be that some of the creatures, instead of having dark vision, they are able to, like, was it infravision? Thank you, Tesla. There's infravision and ultravision, and the visually, maybe a movie like Predator is probably your best bet. Whereas dark vision is more like enhancing low amounts of light. Thermal vision might be able to follow PC footsteps, their body heat, the heat of a campfire, the heat of their passage, and while the PCs could possibly, especially if the creature is blind, right? If the creatures can sense heat, maybe the PCs are able to hide themselves even in bright daylight by surrounding themselves with cold, maybe packing themselves in the snow, or using some kind of a special ability or a magical effect or magic item or something that generates lots of cold around them, which would be a really great way to gift the players that are very invested in your game when, I don't know, the eyeless furred snow serpent or something slithers through the snow and tries to come after them, and then they make some rolls, or the PCs start guessing, or they roll a survival or nature checks or something, and realize that the creature's blind, and then they put two and two together, and it's like, oh, I remember reading in an old book or text or something, they're going after our body heat. So that might be something. Yep, Encountermancer says, or using a fireball as a blinding effect. Using burning hands is like flares from a fighter jet or something, so the 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 snake missile doesn't follow you or whatever. Yeah, of course. Setting one of those orcs on fire and running for it, or setting off, lighting that bottle of oil that you were saving for another time and throwing it in the distance so that the snake goes after it. Pot shots at their body or whatever, the body of the creature. Like, I I would absolutely, you know, thank the PCs, give them that win. Like, oh, that's a great idea. Like, so, maybe the fireball won't work because they're diving deep into the icy lake or something, or in the 80 feet of deep thick snow out in the permafrost or what have you, and the PCs are like, okay, we need the snake to surface, so we need a huge heat sink. And so the wizard's like, okay, I'll cast a fireball, and then it'll really come up towards it, and then when it surfaces, we can go and attack it. And of course, like you said, in Countermancer, using a fireball as a blinding effect, even if it's burned or has some resistance to heated effects, yes, we know cold creatures could have immunity to cold, and fire creatures have immunity to fire. Um, th- these creatures may or may not be vulnerable to fire if they're generating their own heat. I couldn't imagine like a blind furred snake having generating its own heat, but more of your more powerful adversaries might be able to do that. But being remember, it's possible that maybe the PCs actually have the benefit of cover behind a fiery source, a big bonfire. PCs stand behind a big bonfire. The infravisioned creature only sees the heat. They don't see the people. So if you're standing behind the fire, yes, you're giving off heat, but not enough to overcome what you're standing behind. And then maybe you can fire a couple of arrows through that flame to shoot at it, and maybe the arrows are lit on fire when it passes. I don't know. And maybe that's a little too cinematic for some people, but I'd let somebody get away with that. Foolish Kiwi says another thing that adds a layer is the equipment. If you're up in the if you up the ante by making plate or metal armor freeze your character out more than warm furs and hides, like the 3.5 Frostfall book. I Now I'm with you, Kiwi. I'm absolutely with you. Some players will balk at that idea, um, but I'm someone that loves the idea of like plate armor will freeze you the hell out. That potion of healing you wanted to drink is now like a slushy. Was frozen solid. Um, hey, wizard that just cast a fireball, you might want to wear some gloves from now on because if you don't wrap yourselves up, you might your fingers and your toes might get a little numb, and you won't be able to use those somatic spells or something of that nature. Hey, thief, trying to use lockpicks in the frozen wasteland, yeah, your manual dexterity is probably going to be a disadvantage, unless you're able to get that short rest and warm yourself up, or whatever the case might be. Failed saves, those kind of things. And mind you, I'm with you. Listen, we've seen when it's so frozen, they'll take like a bucket of boiling water and throw it in the air, and it freezes before it hits the ground. And Countermeasures like the popsicle of healing. It would be fun, right? And then you have to decide, okay, can I drink the slushy as the healing, or do I have to put it into a bowl and then heat it up when we get to camp, or you know, um, all those kind of things. Like, is healing just the kind of thing like as long as my hands are near the person I heal them, or do I have to literally remove their clothing from around their wounds to heal them, thereby exposing them to the cold in the first place, right? Um, it depends on how closely, how much nuance you want, and what a great way to make what is it in fifth edition the mending cantrip important when your equipment starts to turn brittle, and start ropes start to fray, boots get wet. We One of the worst things in the world is not even just that it's cold. Um, yeah, Kiwi says maybe the frozen potions take longer to absorb. I could see that. Maybe you roll the die and say, okay, you can get 16 points of healing, 1 point every 10 minutes or something, right? Like it takes longer for it to absorb into your body as it starts to thaw a little bit as you start eating the ice chunks. Um, but um, any number of these things you can like pull and drag on, and just extend them out to other things. Now, of course, with the winter, PCs kill the furry blind snake or whatever. I don't know where the hell I came up with that, but they kill it, and with resources being so hard to find, by killing things, you're going to probably draw other um, um, other enemies towards you, and those enemies might be very natural. Everything from carrion eaters to other predators that are might be notified because they can feel the vibration in the snow, they can see the heat signatures, they can smell blood from miles away, much like sharks in the ocean. I'm sure there's plenty of predators that exist out in the Arctic and the cold that are down and find resources for themselves. PCs being one of those so friggin' cold out there. Now, and living, breathing things are so few and far between. Now, another, I kind of brought this up before, maybe some of the hunting methods, and I guess I'm a little bit focusing on the animalistic side. We'll pop over to the more intelligent creatures, but even some of the more animalistic creatures are pretty intelligent, at least instinctually, when it comes to them hunting. I remember, um, Dead Man, Dead Man uh, pops into the Fantasy Grounds College Discord, water freezing in midair, and there's a YouTube thing on that, and then puts in the link to National Geographic as to why it happens. As a matter of fact, there's some pretty beautiful photographs of people making soap bubbles in, and the soap bubble will freeze, and then you can take a picture with the sunlight passing through it, things like that. Encountermancer says, just put the frozen potion in a glass of brandy. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Heck yeah. Big old ice cube in the middle of it while you're just sitting back with your feet up. That's kind of cool. Now, how some of your adversaries attack the PCs could be pretty interesting as well. I kind of brought up the idea of something diving down into like a frozen lake or deep snow and coming up above, so you can start to use a three-dimensional battle map of sorts in your head. Like, sure, you can walk across the surface of the deep snow, and if it's heavy and thick enough, it might be possible for your burrowing and tunneling creatures that maybe might normally be subterranean. You reskin them as winterized creatures, and they can kind of swim and tunnel below in the snow and come up above, pulling the PCs down into the snow, making it difficult for the PCs to protect each other when they're dragged down in the snow. Now, if the snow is light and thin, as many people who go out into heavy snow, a lot of them will carry themselves like a stick, or they'll follow the same path, because you might have very hard packed snow, a wedge yourself down into an icy crevice or something like that. In which case, I'm going to bring this up on a Third Pillar Thursday, but you have the idea of reskinning a bunch of your traps and things out there. So you've got pit traps and collapsing ceiling traps and bear traps and things like that. Pit traps, perfectly acceptable to use in a especially place with heavy tundra and that kind of thing. Also, you can reskin those grease spells as slippery ice, especially when crossing like a frozen lake or something of that nature. And you can start to compound some of these effects with your enemy, which, again, you guys know me. I'm the self-appointed third pillar to the tabletop RPG community. Third pillar being the environment. So you start stacking slippery ice. You got to worry about falling into pit traps. You got to worry about drowning over a frozen lake. You have to worry about Tesla Ranger brings up an icicle spike trap. Absolutely. Why wouldn't there be spiked icicles at the bottom of that trap when you fall down into it? And you can even compound it even further by having snow fall back into the pit. So the person falls into the pit, gets hit on the spike, and then the snow starts falling in on top of them, thereby restraining them, or you can use restraint, grappling, incapacitated, something of that nature. Like, yep, Tesla Ranger says, no, on the ceiling. Oh, okay, you're saying no, on the ceiling. So if they're in like a cave or a dense forest even, maybe they're going through a mountain pass, and there are icicles. I was thinking of the stalagmite at the bottom, but you're thinking of the icicle from the top, where as they're walking along a place where they have ice and snow above them, it could, maybe it's triggered by sound. Yeah, yeah, triggered by sound, and it will fall down on them with the sounds of like battle or that PC that loves to use their Thunderwave spell. It's like, yeah, you're causing a lot more harm than good with those spells. You might want to keep your voices down, you know. That's what's like, I see now. Oh, yeah, the annoying bard, the annoying bard's like, see, guys, I told you you needed me. You're like, whatever. Omen says, looks like we'll be expecting winter after all. A volcanic winter, that is. Ash from an erupting volcano nearby is clouding our skies and raining down on everything. It's not exactly a real winter, but it's a winter nonetheless. Yes, not much winter in Thailand, but but wow, that's yeah. Well, we're gonna have to do a volcanic week as well. Um, Doing all the different environments, I suppose. But that would be cool though. That's a cool little thing we'll come up with. Yeah, man. Omen says, have we discussed nuclear winters and volcanic winters before in a previous week? I don't believe we have. Well, I can't say we haven't. I, I like using the environment, so I kind of bring up that kind of thing pretty much all the time. But specifically, like, no. But for Future Friday, a nuclear winter, hell yeah. Nuclear winters and of course planetary surfaces that are very far from suns that are already frozen and such. Yeah, we'll do that. Foolish Kiwi says, always a good time to break out those winter animals you don't get to see many other places. Say you're running across that treacherous frozen lake while a dire moose decides you're in his territory. What is a dire moose? but very very true though, right? Um, yep, a friendly polar bear. They're very common too. And like I said, you could very easily reskin the hell out of a number of adversaries, right? Like I don't know. Oh, Encountermancer says translucent ropers and piercers that look like ice. Yeah, what is it? The piercers drop from above and the ropers are down below. But yeah, why not? Um, Elementals, reskinning some of those, some water and or if you don't specifically have stats for an ice elemental, you could reskin. No, you could reskin all four elements. You could reskin a fire elemental with as like blue frigid cold. An earth elemental would be ice. A water elemental would be frozen liquid, and an air cold. So yeah, you could reskin all four standard elemental creatures into a frozen area. So I wouldn't say that. Deadman says volcanic winter and nuclear winter was mentioned when talking about vampires. Yeah, because vampires being able to walk around when the sun is the sky's covered is a thing. Which what's the movie? There's a movie called 30 Days of Night. You could very easily throw in some vampires or vampiric um, more intelligent adversaries in the cold because of that. Although the opposite was done in the book and movie, no, in the books World War Z, where humanity ran to the poles and the undead would start to slow down and they were far easier to kill. So you could take that in either direction. The vampires love the wintertime because they don't need to dress in to smell out the blood trails of their enemies. And then there's a frozen undead out there. You know what I mean? Tessa brings up the armored bears from the Golden Compass. I love those. I love those bears. I think that's so cool. Yep, Deadman brings up the same thing. The Golden Compass was the first novel in the series, his Dark Materials, which I believe is on. I'm gonna mess this up. It's is it Amazon here in the States? Or is it Netflix? I don't remember where his Dark Materials is airs. But yeah, I mean, especially if the PCs is it? It's HBO. See, I double made a mistake. Thank you, Hive Brain. Uh, so the idea that there are creatures out there, maybe armored or wearing medallions, or they have other accoutrements on their bodies, might make the PCs kind of reconsider what they're doing if they see that blind snake slithering through the frozen tundra, and it I don't know, erupts out of the ground, and its cobra-like hood opens up and it breathes out ice, and they realize that it's wearing some kind of like something someone would ride on the back of, with a like a bridle, like a horse and bridle and a saddle on it or something. It's dangerous, and who's riding it, you know? Um, oh, thank you, Dead Man, putting in the link in the Discord for his Dark Materials. I haven't taken a look at it, but I heard it's really good. Foolish Kiwi says, our setting has a planet that is an entirely frozen, barren surface, but the inside is liquid and filled with merfolk, etc., like a giant aquarium orb. Also, uh, um, lends to a brilliant eclipse. You know what? Is it Europa, they believe, or Io, or one of the Saturn moons? Wow, I'm really butchering our solar system here. Anyway, there's the idea, maybe it's Jupiter, because Jupiter has super high gravitational field. Is believed to be completely frozen on the outside, upwards of 60 miles of frozen land on the outside of it, and the inside, because of the gravity and radiation, is liquid because it keeps flexing and moving, and that there may be life deep down inside of the aquatic center, which I love the idea of that, because Dead Man's also puts in like Ceres, Europa, Ganymede, and several others are like that as well. So yeah, well, and you can very easily take that idea, if you're not doing something sci-fi, and just have like this frozen tunnels, like maybe on the surface. Okay, PCs go far to the north of your world. They go to the deep tundra. They look around and they go, no wonder no one found anything. It's all flat and snowy. But then, yeah, yep, that all of society is below their feet as they find an entrance to it, and it could be your version, your wintry version of the Underdark, but it's all frozen. So you could have frozen slippery tunnels. Maybe there are like purple worms, but they're not purple, right? But there's like purple worms that are used to dig tunnels in every which way, and the frozen dwarves or gnomes or what have you follow along behind them. And what a great way to, of course, we can go back to adding in those falling traps, slippery locations, pit traps, would happen just about everywhere. I would deign to say that the person who loves using their Thunderwave spell, you might want to pick something else, or because you might be creating your own collapsing tunnels behind you, or maybe even attacking a tunneling creature and then going after the tunneling creature, because the tunneling creature leaves behind it even if it's temporary, they leave behind it a tunnel for the PCs to escape from being trapped somewhere. And then you could add in other things of melting snow if there's heat, flooded chambers here and there with aquifers, with very cold but liquid water. You have waterfalls because you'll have melted snow um, spilling down some of these tunnels and such. And then at the very bottom of it, the PCs realize that it's not just frozen, but they're above a vast ocean. Salt water, of course, tends not to freeze, whereas fresh water does. So salt water it makes a lot of sense for it not to be frozen if you want to use some real life ecology or something. And then down in the deep, you can have like lichen or some other glowing creatures, and now you can start mixing some of those aquatic creatures you don't get a chance to use too much of, or anything like that. Deadman Tesla put it from DeviantArt, the evil snowman. Deadman says, then there's Tinder Snowflake from the Marcus Mercenary Day Hunter DLC from Borderlands 2. I've never heard of that. It's Christmas Oh, well, there is that too. If you want to be snarky about like using winter and using like a Christmas theme, of course you have yourself whoever it is up there in the Arctic North, portraying your version of Kris Kringle, Saint Nick, or something like that. Could be you could do a very Nordic, Norse god type of thing where you know. Santa Claus is basically Odin or an Odin typed individual. Having yourself a flying sleigh pulled by goats and that kind of thing. That'd be kind of cool though. Also, with winter comes the idea that as brutal and as compounded of difficulties there are, for you as the game master to create situations in which the PCs have to deal with more difficulties without you just outright killing them. I bring up Luke Skywalker and the Wampa, right? Luke Skywalker gets smacked in the back of the head with a surprise attack, wakes up with his feet frozen in the ceiling because the Wampa's probably holding him later on for dessert, or something. And so having maybe the PCs come across trapped, the lost tribe or explorers that the PCs were sent to go find, and they're trapped behind frozen cages, or maybe they've been imprisoned in like kind of a frozen stasis of sorts. Maybe there's a wizard's conclave that are experts not just with snow and ice, but being able to place things into stasis, and so one by one, when the PCs try to break into the lair of this place that's deep down in the snow and the tunnels, they're able to shatter the ice to bring out of that ice frozen monsters that could have been harvested or captured like a big giant zoo from all around the world. And so when the creatures come out, they could be creatures from swamps and deserts and mountains and from the deep sea and from the plains and all that kind of stuff. And you're like, what the hell is this doing over here? You know. Foolish Kiwi says, never be afraid to do that. Sunter Claus can visit your character too. Sunter means pack horseman. Did not know that. There's a lot of, I will readily admit, there's a lot of Christmas and Santa lore that I don't know very much of, especially the darker themed versions of it with like, what's the opposite of Santa Claus? Krampus and the other creatures that are out there. There's more than one. Excuse me. Okay, so getting more into our intelligent adversaries out there in the wilderness, something as simple as your typical goblinoids, like bugbears, the more furry ones. You can give them the white fur. Maybe your bugbears are very closely related to, say, Yeti or something, and they've got white fur. Maybe those same goblinoids just are able to, of course, they go out and kill white-skinned creatures using them, so that gives them a lot of camouflage out there in the wilderness and such. And much like I feel like there is a limitation on dark vision that we don't often recognize, the same thing could be done here, in which dark vision only goes to, in general, for player characters, only goes to 60 feet. There are a few modifications that allows it to go further. When enemies are at the edge of your vision, you may hear them, but you may not be able to see them. And the same thing goes for targeting your own allies as well. Dire penguins. They're too cute. I don't care how bad they want to peck out my liver. I still think they're cute. Heck, those penguins might be the allies that the PCs need to escape and such. Now, but oh my goodness, I can't imagine being heavily laden with armor and equipment falling into like frozen seawater. Ooh, and if you're going to add in some kind of aquatic effect, like for you, Kiwi talking about the frozen surface and the aquatic ocean. If you're a construct or um, somehow your PC is extremely heavy and not buoyant, you might, I don't know, you might settle down into a 60-mile deep, Marianas Trench kind of thing, simply because you failed one roll to hold on to the icicle poking down into the deep ocean or whatever. I don't know, but yeah, Warforged, you're gonna have to do a little session zero if you're Warforged, or I think Warforged. I think there's like Cobalt Press or something has like they use Gear Forged. Um, but yeah, if you're Warforged, it makes sense that one does float, since there are no rules that dictate whether someone can or cannot float. Um, yeah, you might want to have that discussion with your players in terms of that. Now, there's also the idea that um, when it comes to being, how fast does frostbite set in, if it does at all? What kind of effects will it have on the body? Is it just a series of saves, or is it, exhaustion? Yeah, if we says at least you might not have to breathe, which might be the trade-off, right? You're like, listen, um, there's an undead in the UA. There's an undead racial type or character type um, that is available, and a dead body could sink, but live bodies float. So that might have some kind of effect, or maybe it's like a feather fall effect. So you will sink, but you'll only sink at a particular rate of speed. So maybe the other player characters can kind of help you. Suppose you could flip the script on a feather fall and call it buoyancy. So you could have a buoyancy spell that brings you up from from the depths, as opposed to letting you fall down from high gravity areas. I don't know. Anyway, it just came to mind. So also, when we talk about intelligent adversaries, going back to my vision thing, if people or enemies are at the very edge of your vision, especially if they're in a blizzard and vision's been cut down to 1, 2, 3 squares away, 5, 10, 15 feet or so. When there's heavy snow, blizzards, combine that with being in the dark, or fog or something like that, being able to target those enemies and or your allies might be a problem, right? I don't have a current list, but I'm sure if you do a little digging, you can find a list of spells that require you to visually see the target, whether they are an ally to heal them or give them some kind of benefit, or to attack an enemy. And if you can't see them and they're running around out there in the frigid cold, you might want to rethink some of your tactics. Maybe someone has to um, illuminate the region so you can see them. Maybe the PCs will have to fight back to back, collecting together, even though they know that they might be victim to some kind of area attack by the enemy, trying to freeze them into place. Um, Heck, you could even add, if there's like a chance of being suffering from an avalanche, or frozen in solid ice, or falling down in crevices and all the snow, the additional hazard might be just moving the ice and snow out of the way in the first place to get to an ally or an enemy or something of that nature. So if you fall into that pit and it gets packed with snow, you might have to spend time to dig your way out. You may have to chisel a PC out of the ice after they've been frozen into it, or when there's that collapsing snow off of the cliffside or the crevice or the ceiling or something like that. When that falls down, you now might have the benefit of being protected by cover, but you might have the limitation that you can't move because that same cover is also keeping you from moving, right? Um, uh, does it sound a little complicated? Sure, it sounds a little complicated, but throwing in, you we could do the proverbial I roll to hit it, it rolls to hit me, I roll to hit it, attrition. but being trapped in snow from the waist down while a winter wolf is coming after you, and there's another PC, but there's a blizzard going on, and throwing in these X factors, the throwing in the chaos, I feel like is a great way to make that scene memorable. It's not just you're being attacked by bugbears with trained winter wolves, and they're also riding on the back of I don't know, frozen wasteland snakes or something. But you have this idea where you have multiple things going on. Trap-minded kobolds would definitely use a ton, surround themselves, with those piercers and ropers. They don't have to be friends with them, but they would definitely make their havens in and around those kinds of creatures. Using the idea of the collapsing ceiling and the pit traps and the slippery slopes and the spilling water, frozen water that might come down some of those tubes that were dug out by those purple worms and things. So I'm for me, I, I don't know. I think you could have a lot of fun using a three-dimensional realm and a lot of these creatures, especially frozen ones. I mean, reskinning them into being cold and frozen and that kind of thing. Um, you could also, going with the reskinning idea, taking maybe some of your favorite creatures that are not adapted to the cold and frozen wasteland, but giving them maybe a cold damage potential. So I just make top of the head, if the creature normally does like 2d8 damage, maybe one of those die 8s also does cold damage, so it might be like slashing and cold damage, or bludgeoning and cold damage, and splitting the difference. Of course, mixing, matching, or trading off. Hey, the creature's got, I don't know, resistance to psychic damage. I'm going to change one of their resistances to cold, and you could even give it, even if a creature isn't vulnerable to heat, if the PCs are able to generate, heat, going back to that fireball, that blinding them or something, having them act and react to heat and fire and blinding light might be a way for the PCs to navigate in this particular region when you're using them, right? One of the questions that sometimes comes up in the RPG community is like, how do you adjudicate which creatures attack who and when? And the thing is that it's not a matter of picking only one way to do it, right? Like, oh, all the creatures will be evenly distributed amongst the players, or oh, the creatures automatically attack the first character. Like, you don't have to do that. What you want is consistency and verisimilitude of the realism in your world of the creatures that are in it. So an example would be that the infravision attributed furry snake, blind snake that I keep talking about, that goes after the largest heat source, will consistently go after the largest heat source, if you understand what I'm saying. So if your PC is the large half-orc that's warm, maybe it will go after that largest heat source until the wizard of the group casts a fireball, in which case the snake will take its turn to go after that largest heat source, if you follow what I'm saying. And so the creatures in your world, and of course the intelligent adversaries, might be inclined to, go after heat sources, or stay away from burning things, or the intelligent adversaries want to take out that wizard that has, fireball spell or something, because they have access to it. So picking and choosing and how they're able to do a thing, I think, is very dependent on the environment, their behavior, and such. Now, I brought up a lot of creatures that are adapted to the cold, but that doesn't necessarily need to be. You can very much have adversaries and the stereotypical captured princess, right? Although you can definitely have the prince captured and the princess is going after her man, but um, you could have the PCs going after the MacGuffin, whatever that MacGuffin is, being dragged or taken across a frozen wasteland, and maybe the enemies they're going after are not adapted. They have just as many struggles as the PCs to to climb over and go down, snow drifts, and watch out for um, mountain passes that where there might be an avalanche or something, and navigate their way through a place where it's very precarious. If they stepped in the wrong place, they'll fall down into a tight crevice or into a deep dark pit. Now again, those deep dark pits you might not suffer any damage if you fall down there, but if you're in an 80-foot distance and you've only got 50 feet of rope, it might be very difficult to pull your favorite, or not so favorite PC back up to where everyone else is on the surface of the tundra or something. So those might be additional hazards that the PCs have to navigate around, unless they start using and abusing the environment against their enemies. So maybe their enemies are just as blind in that blizzard as they are, and the PCs are like, you know what, we're not going to be able to snipe them, but if we sneak up on them, we can take them out in the blizzard and they'll never know it. You know what I mean? So, and going back to my concept of the triangle, if those blind furry snakes are slithering around underneath both the PCs and the NPCs that the PCs are going after, maybe that big heat source blasted at the enemy might make that snake jump out of the snow to go after them, right? After their own enemies, the PC's enemies. So, yeah, learning about your world, learning about the behavior of your creatures, having those creatures behave in a manner in which is indicative of where they live and where they're from, or where they don't live and where they're not from, especially if the enemies are not prepared to go out into the deep winter because they're being hunted by the PCs that were hired to go after them, or sent on a mission or whatnot. And finding some of the NPCs frozen, suffering from frostbite, or being attacked, or having fallen into one of those pit traps the PCs didn't even realize was there. Having the snow collapse on top of the NPCs, and or losing the MacGuffin down deep into frozen caverns that the PCs need to find it because it slipped down in there, or that blind furry snake swallows one of the NPCs that's got the MacGuffin. Could be I don't know, medallion, or a scroll, or a ring, or whatever the case might be. Swallows it, burrows its way back down, 5 miles down deep in the frozen permafrost, and the PCs are like, okay, I guess this means the adventure continues. And when the game ends and the snake starts slithering its way down into the permafrost, the PCs are like, yeah, we're going to have to go down deep. So, half frozen, half subterranean adventure or something. So, yeah, just being able to do that, I think, in a game, and using the environment to flavor and shift and change the behaviors of the creatures in it and the intelligent adversaries, I think is awesome. Especially if you want to go far, your world is created by some kind of arcane element as opposed to being something natural. And so you could maybe there was a spell or a curse or an opening to an elemental plane that froze this part of the world. So normally the PCs maybe are able to find things that normally wouldn't be in a frozen tundra, but the frozen land happens so fast that people were like frozen in their homes and things. The Encountermancer brings up, drop the PC into a hot spring that isn't warm enough to hurt them, but now they're soaked, and if they leave the pool, they'll freeze. Ooh, I like that. And going back to Omen, talking about volcanic activity and ash falling like snow. There's no reason that you can't incorporate a volcano, or at least subterranean volcanic activity, which I believe happens with hot springs. That the very thin thin shell of not being burned to death and freezing to death might be the place where the PCs are like, okay, we're going to need to map this out because this is the exact place we need to stay if we're not going to like absolutely die if we go out into the wilderness. Because we go left, we're going to burn to death. We go right, we're going to freeze to death. And also playing with that idea as well. Maybe the PC's adversaries live in and around the hot springs and the volcanic activity because it's warmer, and that's where the PCs are heading. But they've got to go through the frozen tundra to get there in the first place. You know. Yep, Dead Man brings up, like in The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, and the witch making it winter all year long. Yes. I'm going to bring up something that only an old grognard like myself would know. Do you guys remember Fire and Ice? The animated, I believe it was Steve Botchke. It was back when they used to paint over the cells of by painting over real people doing real things, and it was called Fire and Ice. And the evil king was ice, and the goodly people lived in the warmer summer fire region. And the Ice King would use his power to spread this frozen landscape across the world. And so, yes, you could very much have a winter-themed lich or council of wizards or some powerful entity. I don't know, some hell, ice devils or something, or white dragon or something, even some things that are even more powerful than that, literally causing the winter to spread or to be in a region where there normally isn't winter. Like, I don't know, traveling across a vast desert, and in the middle of this vast desert, there's this weird, strange white dome of something, and you find out that thank you, Dead Man. I knew somebody. I was thinking it was you or Tesla would pull that up. Yeah, finding the Fire and Ice, 1983 film. Is 83? I thought it was early. Well, I guess I was 13 years old. So yeah, that is it. I loved that movie. I haven't seen it in a long time, so I don't know if it holds up. But yes, it was that was an interesting filming technique to film actors performing the actions and then painting over it so they could paint in um, the backgrounds and the amazing landscapes and things of that nature. So, I apologize. I do have a head cold of sorts. Its intensity has gone up and down, and I can feel it rising as I get to the end of this podcast. But again, using creatures, enemies, reskinning them so that they fit into a wintry, stasis, static-like environment. Maybe there are creatures that are frozen or held in stasis in this world in which they are being woken up. We've seen a ton of enemies in any kind of intellectual property that are locked away and will be awakened when certain circumstances are still there. Yeah, I suffer from chronic presentism. Omen. He's like, yeah, are you? But you're still going to work with that cold? Yeah, I'm still going. I I don't call into work. I just don't do it. I should. I know my wife is probably screaming at me while she's getting ready for work. Like, yeah, you shouldn't go to work, but whatever. But anyway, guys, thank you very much. We will continue our discussion of winter. Of course, tomorrow is Discord Tuesday. That's when I've been using it to talk about mechanics, but it's kind of a grab bag as well. We have a World Building Wednesday where maybe we will talk about, we'll steal Kiwi's idea, which don't tell him, about a winter wonderland, a world that's entirely snow and frozen and with frozen oceans and things of that nature. Third Pillar Thursday is the third pillar of exploration. You know, my favorite. Of course, I brought it up today. I always do things like that. But we will talk about exploration and the dangers that are involved. And then we have ourselves Future Friday. Encounter Mansion says, I'm about to cover Quest for the Silver Sword on my channel. It's a village trapped in an endless winter. Oh, real. Let me see if you can. Oh, you can't put in. You can't put in a link, can you, Encounter Mancer? It is your channel called Encountermancer? Because I can put in a link. Just let me know, and then I will put in the link so other people can go there. I don't have a problem doing it. Not at all. Tesla Ranger says winter in a variety of worldwide cities. Campaign mastery. The diversity of seasons. Oh, I'm gonna check that out too. All right, guys. So, by the way, thank you very much. All you guys, thank you for those of you that are here in the States. It's hella early, so I really appreciate it. I know there are a lot of people who may catch this stream later on. I appreciate that as well. If for those of you who are unable to participate live, please leave a comment or something somewhere. You can find it on the Discord, on the chat. You can find me on Facebook, whatever. Leave a comment or something if you want it brought up later on. I don't have a problem with that. Oh, okay. Let me see if I can do this for Encounter Mancer, if you don't mind. Let's see. Because I thought I had saved under. I guess I don't. There we go. And let's copy here. I know. I'm putting out dead air. And bam, paste to Mr. E's channel. We will take a look at that. I have no problem. Oh, and they're long form too. I'm a fan of long form because I'm in my head most of the day. You know, you guys, or at least you should already know, I'm a mailman, and so I'm in my head most of the day. So I love to listen to long form content. A lot of people don't have the ability to do that, so I agree with that. And if I can draw, push people towards your channel, Encounter, why the hell not? I don't own this space, dude. So yeah, you could have brought that up a long time ago, man. I would have done that for you. Anyway, guys, and also, by the way, that's not reserved for Encounter Mancer. If some of you are out there who are creating content and you would like others to, myself included, take a look at it, whether it's like you're in the blogosphere, you're writing, you're drawing, you're, I don't know, hell, you're acting, you're dancing, whatever like that, just let me know. And we can, a high tide floats all ships. So yeah, absolutely, guys. If I can be a nexus for creatives out there, I would love to do it. So anyway, thank you very much for tolerating the DBJ's nasally audio. I apologize for that. Also, you guys have your time is extremely valuable. I'm glad you could spend it with me. I hope you're able to leave with a little bit of change. Thank you very much, guys. Have a great one. I'll see you tomorrow.